This rather odd-looking man is Piers Corbyn, who actually predicted this nasty weather, which the British government failed to do.
Some couple of weeks ago, on December 27th, this story about Piers Corbyn was broken open by Fox News. What I'm going to do is play a little bit of Fox News, the story about Piers, so you get an idea. It is entitled The Mocked Meteorologist Who Got the Last Laugh, and Piers is indeed that man. So let me just play a little bit of this story for you, then we'll say hello to Piers in person.
Back in November, the UK's government weather forecasting office claimed that this winter would be mild. That's the same office pushing a global warming agenda. But here's the forecast for this winter, as predicted in November by astrophysicist and meteorologist Piers Corbyn. Take a listen.
The winter, December to February, inclusive in Britain and Europe, will be exceptionally cold and snowy, like hell frozen over at times.
He was right. It feels like that outside right now. You're looking at video of an extremely snowy Britain from this week. So much for global warming. He says prepare.
Okay, that's the story about Piers Corbyn. You're a meteorologist. You're also an astrophysicist. That's very interesting. Right. That makes you a man of remarkable credentials in a field, at least over here, populated by people who are pretty faces, claiming to be meteorologists, who are on all the weather channels. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
It's pretty disgusting. Why was it so clear for you and not anybody else at the Met or anywhere else over there?
Well, we understand basically how the sun, through particle and magnetic activity, influences the Earth's weather. And we can look back in the past to when the total influences and modulations by the moon, for example, are similar to what they're going to be at some time in the future. So it's a mathematical and physics way of looking at it. So we then use the weather in the past as a predictor for the weather in the future. So
how far back did you go, Piers?
We use data going back hundreds of years. Or it may just be 40 years or 50 years, but that sort of thing. We'd have a number of different times in the past of relevance and use the weather in those past times to predict the future.
You obviously are a man eminently qualified to be a meteorologist scientist. When you were bringing these forecasts and predictions forward, you were laughed at. You were mocked.
Indeed, yes.
How did that happen? I mean, here you are, obviously a man of great credential, a true scientist. How did it happen that the rest of these people were so Was it a question of the sheep just following each other, and you were the odd man out?
Yes, I would say so, yes. You see, standard meteorology doesn't believe in external influences. Their models are constructed entirely from looking at the weather now and saying, well, this piece of air is moving that way and that one is moving this way, and this will get warmer, that will get colder, this will fall rain into rain, and you put it all in a great big computer, and then you predict what will happen next. Well, it works okay for about 4 days ahead, and after that it doesn't work very well, or not at all after 5 or 10 days, because there are external influences which are more important.
And
I mean, it's a bit like trying to forecast what's going to happen on a road by watching all the cars interacting with each other, but ignoring what happens when they get at crossroads.
Ah, very good. Understand. Yeah, right.
I mean, it's just a complete nonsense. It doesn't work when there are external things happening to cars on the road or bits of atmosphere, because the sun, solar activity, particle and magnetic effects, cause the jet stream to change its motion, and that changes the whole weather pattern, and that enables us, for example, to predict when there's going to be extreme weather events, which is when the jet stream tends to get stuck in certain positions. And standard meteorology can't cope with this sort of stuff. All it'll do in any long-range forecast is to say that things are going to come back to the norm, which in a sense they never do, or because there's always external forcing factors which change the weather. It's a state of constant change, not a norm.
You're almost saying that these are flat earthers.
Well, absolutely. Their process is stupid and arrogant. They assume that their little model of the Earth's weather is better than nature itself, the whole system between the centre of the sun to the Earth, better than that at predicting itself. I mean, it's just complete nonsense.
This is so myopic.
And it will never work. However big their computers, they will never be able to do anything effective.
Well, because the data they're feeding it is obviously myopic and stupid, as you say.
Well, it's rubbish in, gives rubbish out. Or, well, actually, it can be quite good data goes in, but the way they're looking at it is...
Well, because the software is written in a corrupted fashion.
It's myopic, yes.
Yeah. The software is corrupted. It's corrupted. It's lacking. Now, do you have your own computer with the external influences, such as they are, the sun being the obvious giant?
No, we have computers, but they're no bigger than, it's just a PC where we work out certain parameters and predict these forwards and backwards. And the rest of the stuff is done by hand. Namely, we identify where in the past which dates are relevant, and then find the weather data for those, if it exists. Of course, sometimes the data doesn't exist. But fortunately, Europe and the USA have loads of past weather data due to the hard work of Victorians and those later who just wrote down everything they could about what they saw.
Fascinating. And you spend a lot of time then, I guess, time traveling back to study.
Oh, yes. You read weather diaries and last year I remember we were reading various American military records of what ships were doing in the South China Sea, but it wasn't the South China Sea, but somewhere, you know.
When you brought your forecasts out, did anybody give you the time of day? Did anybody take you seriously?
Yes, we have a certain group of people that buy our forecasts, and farmers use them on a regular basis. Some people in energy industry and shops doing wholesale. But in the main, the meteorological establishment officially pays us no attention. Unofficially, I know there's a number of meteorologists in the Met Office who are extremely impressed by what we do, but they're not allowed to say anything because, of course, it would upset their global warming belief. You see, which is that CO2, not only the weather, weather itself is caused by the weather itself, but also man's CO2 upsets it even more. So their theory is just a double nonsense.
I want to get to that CO2 issue in a few minutes, but let me back up. Being an astrophysicist, you recognize the sun's influence on our planet probably better than most all of your colleagues, with a few exceptions. Yeah. How is it that man at this stage in his and her so-called evolution can be so stupid and so close-minded as to ignore and exclude the sun as being key to what happens on this entire planet, which is the truth?
Well, yes, that is a good question, but you see, it's not without precedent. I mean, man has always found he's able to conquer nature in a lot of ways, and then believe too much that he's in charge of it. In fact, I'm just looking at the Queensland floods happening right now. Well, you know, quite a lot of these are understandable in solar lunar terms, but you know, they believed. In fact, they didn't build certain dams in Queensland precisely because the global warmers told them they wouldn't be necessary and they were going to have droughts forever. So the floods are worse than they would have been.
I didn't know that.
I mean, the point is that the arrogance of man over nature is not new. I mean, at the time of Galileo, the Catholic Church just said what was, reality in their terms, and there wasn't going to be any argument about it.
I watched some video of the floods at Toowoomba in Queensland, and just quite amazing footage. About 50 cars were swept away. I think close to 100 people are missing right now. I don't know over what you have over there, Piers, but over here we have Weather Channel this, Weather Channel that, and of course all the local television stations have their buxom blonde meteorologists who can barely pronounce the word solar activity without stumbling. it's pretty grim. I don't know how these people end up getting to be called meteorologists, but it's particularly sad. Now, you studied at Queen Mary College, and when you were there working, you took a very close look at the Earth's weather, its climate, and solar activity. Was this something that really set you off on the road to where you are right now? Did that give you your grounding and understanding the solar and solar system relationships that you rely upon to predict?
Yes, although my interest in it had started earlier when I was a school student. I was very interested in the weather and did measurements made my own weather station and stuff in the
as a kid
countryside in Shropshire, and then I went to Imperial College and studied physics, and after that did astrophysics at Queen Mary College, London.
So as a kid you were fascinated by the weather?
That's right, yes. I made a weather station of, the usual thing with a thermometer, a rain gauge, and I made my own device to measure wind speed, and I made a barometer from water, or in fact brine, salted water, up the side of the house to measure air pressure. And
you're amazing.
Made a few other things.
That's amazing, Piers. The issue of the sun. Now, as you know, and most of you listening may know, for about the last 8 or 9 months, the sun was essentially almost flatlining in solar activity. There were no solar flares.
Low activity,
yeah. Did that presage anything in particular for you, or was that just a normal, not even an aberration, just a normal cycle in solar behavior?
Well, it was a normal cycle, except it was the low level of activity has carried on for longer than there are standard projections of solar activity as well. It was longer than those were saying, and the activity now is lower than all those standard projections. And there are various ways of looking at the past in the sun to see about direct correlations. However, the important factor which influences the weather isn't just the amount of solar activity. It is the magnetic connections, the direction of those things, and interruption by the moon. And in general terms, the solar-lunar modulation effect means you have a overriding sort of 60-year type of cycle, which makes the otherwise magnetic cycle of temperatures go up and down, which is the 22-year cycle. Now, I'm just saying that to illustrate that you can't just look at low solar activity and say, therefore, it's going to be cold. It's not like that. The reason for us coming up with this extremely cold winter, especially the December in Britain and Europe, was the quite specific situation involving the lunar modulation of solar magnetic linkages and when those last happened.
Interesting. The moon has an effect on this planet that few people know about. We have a geologist over here named James Birkeland, and he talks about lunar tides, not just ocean tides, but land tides. And when the moon is over a large landmass, that landmass actually rises several feet from the moon.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah. The whole Earth is distorted all the time by the moon. I mean, you see underneath the Earth, it's essentially liquid rock, so the whole thing is changing, changing shape all the time, which is one thing which exacerbates earthquakes. In fact, I did studies a long time ago. In fact, it's a student project where we looked at the various earthquake data. There's a lunar signal, for example, in Iranian earthquake data. I say Iranian earthquake data because they actually have one of the best data sets in the world going back a long time for earthquakes. There have been a lot of them in Iran.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the remainder of the winter. What do you foresee? What was your projection about that?
The important thing is we've got our best forecasts for various reasons in the eastern part, and we predicted quite explicitly that monster blizzard to the day, which hit New York. And there's a similar thing going on around now, which we also predicted. predicted. And now, that one which hit just after Christmas, we'd announced that 2 weeks ahead.